I wanted to ask you about this photo, Papa.
That particular motorcycle that you're looking at was the second motorcycle that I owned. It was a basket job. It had a molded frame. It was a beautiful bike. But when I went to put it together, it everything was so molded on it that you couldn't basically bolt anything onto the frame and build it up. It didn't have a front end. I ended up getting a Springer for it and working from there. It was a if I remember right, it was a 1947 Knucklehead. Now Knucklehead was the biggest engine Harley had at the time. It was where they call the other one's 74s. This was a 61. But so I bought a 53 panhead for parts. And after a while I thought, well, I think I'll take and I got to looking at it and I thought, you know, I think I'd much rather build one from the scratch, all my idea. So I come up with an idea that I was going to make it like early American. The front end was a Springer. I made that. I bought the steel, took it to a machine shop, had it turned down to look like an old bedpost with the knobs and everything on it. I made my own Springer. I ordered the seat. I was gonna order it, and then I ended up saying, well, you know, I can make the seat. So I made the seat. I had it covered, and that turned out well. The front headlight, I made that. I made the light that the headlight was in. That was in another one that you'll see later on. I called it Early American was the name of it. My sissy bar and everything was turned down, and everything turned out very well. Prior to that, in some of the pictures you'll see where Tim was there with me, and I think I was roughly 19, 20, maybe 21, and I would work out in the garage that was behind my parents' house there in Norwood. There was no heat there, and the wintertime was quite cold, and I had a gas a gas little stove. Actually, I've got the stove back here if you want to see it, but I can show you the stove. Whoops, I need to turn it. But if you look at this little stove right here, this little heater, it's a gas heater, and I ended up putting that out in the garage. Now, it was about 60 foot away from the house, so I needed a way to get gas out there. So I thought, you know, how am I going to get gas out there? I know. There was a petcock down in the basement, and where I could hook the gas line up to. Now, petcock is just a valve that you turn it on and turn it off, turn the gas on and off with. And so I decided I'm going to take a water hose and hook to that and run it to the garage. And that's what I did. And a lot of people just thought, "Boy, this is terrible." But you know, I got to thinking. Gas is measured in ounces. You know, very few ounces. Water is measured in pounds, and water is good for like 60, 70, 80 pounds of pressure. So I wasn't worried about that, and I tested it all. And what I would do is I would go out, I would I would go down the basement, I would turn the gas on, I would go outside, turn the gas on to the little heater there and light it up, and I'd work there 5 or 6 hours at night, every night out there putting this bike together, and it turned out quite well. I was quite proud of it, and thinking back, for somebody doing something that at 19, 20 years old and completing it was quite a feat, and I'm proud of that. You know, that's just how it is. Now, other bikes that I had, I ended up buying a Sportster, and I was in the process of turning that into a three-wheeler, but I just got too busy with work and didn't have a chance to fix it. But my brother Tim, when he got home from the service, I had him set up with a VW three-wheeler. Now it wasn't your typical VW. This VW, the engine was turned around backwards and you sat over top of it. It had a set of 6-foot-long forks, and it was a Springer, and I ended up making that. We had a hard time keeping the front end down. This thing, Tim could pull up behind a car and be 2 foot away. He could pull a 6-foot wheelie and drop it down, and he'd be 18 inches away. It scared the hell out of people. It was because they thought they was coming through. You get out on the expressway with it, and you go to make a curve, and it would just bounce. So what I ended up doing is I put tractor fluid in the tires, and I made big weights to go on them. But then when I made him a new Springer for it, instead of having hollow tubing, I had 2x2 square tubing, solid. And his top bar, the Springer bars, was 1x1, so this sucker weighed a lot. We had a hell of a time finding somebody who would chrome it because they were afraid that they were going to lose it in their tank. But had a lot of fun with those. Tim and I was always going to take a trip out to California on our bikes, but we never did. But that's the way things go. Just letting you know some stories about Tim and this three-wheeler. We had a lot of fun. It had a Harley title, even though it had a VW engine in it. It was partially a Harley frame, and it worked out, quite well. Now, we would go to field meets, and Tim and I, when we were in a couple motorcycle clubs. The first one I was in was Nobody's Children, and then a lot of the people switched and went to the Peacemakers, and Peacemakers was a lot of fun. But we would go to these motorcycle turnouts, and we would they would have a wheelie contest right off the bat, or they would have a wheelie contest the first thing, and Tim would always win all the wheelie contests, three-wheeler wheelie contests. But right after that, they had three-wheeler drags. Well, when he went to the wheelie contest, I would take his weights off, and then he could stay on his back two wheels. Seemed like forever. He'd drive around like that. But when it come down to the motorcycle drags, we didn't have enough time to put the weights on. So I would jump on top of the front end of it, and where I had the bolts sticking out to hold the weights, that's where I put my feet, and I would ride underneath of it, and with my hands underneath, and I was his weights, and we would go through the drag contest. It was fun. We won some, lost some. It was just a lot of fun. So that's where we're at.